Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey, everybody. We are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more lights, and more love. And more people I didn't know about until before this episode. We're back with another lecture episode, people. We've been getting so many requests. People love the interviews, but they also love the lecture episodes. So we're back with another lecture episode. Today, we're going to be introduced to a man named Ernest Holmes. What's up, Holmes? Apparently, he was a very prominent person in his time, and he's one of the great lecturers of the early 20th century, and I'm sure he was an inspiration to all the people that we love of that era. If I were to say his name to people like Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, etc., they would be like, of course we know Ernest Holmes. But I did not know about Ernest Holmes personally until recently. And I don't think my guest co-host has either. Brynn Anderson of Vital Force Herbs. How are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. And have you ever heard of Ernest Holmes?
Oh, yeah. We go way back.
I don't believe you. Is it real? You know Ernest Holmes?
Yeah.
How?
He was my great-great-grandfather.
You're so full of herbal medicine right now.
Actually, I have heard of Ernest Holmes, but I have not listened to a lecture of his.
Really? You really have?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, wow. Well, we're going to be listening to a few smaller, shorter lectures on various topics. We're going to get to know this person. It's going to be interesting. But before we do that, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram if you have not done that already. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us so you know exactly what's going on all the time. And don't forget to tell a friend. Word of mouth is so huge. And you know what we're doing here. We have so much amazing content, so many great guests, so many great lectures. The news that we cover, you know what we're doing. You know who needs it. Bring them here. midnightonearth.com. And don't forget our sponsor, Vital, V-I-T-A-L, Vital Force Herbs. Brynn Anderson, who's here with me now, has a company called Vital Force Herbs. And they make the most amazing blends I've ever seen in my life. As far as tinctures and the quality of tinctures. When I work with people in this type of wellness treatment, because you got to be careful what you say, right? So this type of wellness treatment, I always try to find the most high quality products out there. My God, when we had Blue Cobra CBD, Howard Hits, that was the best, highest quality CBD product I'd ever seen in my life. This is how I feel about Vital Force Herbs. Her blends are amazing, and much like Howard Hit had a proprietary process, Brynn has a proprietary crystal infusion process, which I believe personally, this is just my own conjecture, I believe there's something about the energy of the crystals infused into the water, infused into the blends themselves that activates or amplifies, I should say, the healing energy of the plant, that wellness treatment. So check it out. There's so many different blends for so many different situations wellness situations you might find yourself in. And we have a discount code, midnight, 30% off any order, literally one bottle, any order, free shipping. Try this. She's really giving it a big push right now, trying to get the highest quality products out to people, these wellness treatments. Check it out. Vital, VITAL, forceherbs.com. Vitalforceherbs.com. Okay. Thanks for sponsoring us, Brynn. It's been great having you here. And I'm sure the many people that have already taken advantage of that discount code are very happy right now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, midnight, MIDNIGHT. Put it in the box at checkout, as they say. So back to Ernest Holmes. And here's his bio, because we're going to read his bio just like we would if he was a guest here, because like I often say on these lecture episodes, he is a guest here in spirit. He wants to come through. He's trying to come through. He wants to be on the show. I'm telling you, people, word is getting out on the other side. At the hot place to be is midnight on Earth. You can be in the third dimension, the fifth dimension. It doesn't matter. You can still be here on this program. Here's his bio. Ernest Holmes, born 1887, graduated in 1960, was an American New Thought writer, teacher, and leader. He was the founder of a spiritual movement known as religious science, part of the greater New Thought movement, whose spiritual philosophy is known as, quote, the science of mind. He was the author of The Science of Mind and numerous other metaphysical books, and the founder of Science of Mind magazine, in continuous publication since 1927. Wow. His books remain in print, and the principles he taught as, quote, Science of Mind have inspired and influenced many generations of metaphysical students and teachers. Holmes had previously studied another New Thought teaching, divine science, and was ordained divine science minister. Interesting. His influence beyond New Thought can be seen in the self-help movement. Okay. So Ernest Holmes, new to me, probably, again, influenced all the people that I love. Maybe. Probably. Brynn has a very intimate relationship with him. Did you say you heard of him once?
Yes, I have.
Okay, that's what it was. I knew it was something. I couldn't remember if it was like it was like between never met him and, personal mentor. I couldn't remember which one it was.
Somewhere in there. No, I am familiar with Ernest Holmes, but I have not actually listened to one of his lectures.
And these are excerpts that I found from a greater series called How to Use the Science of Mind. Okay. But really, I'm sure it's just his interpretation of universal laws and more. So we're just going to listen to 4 sections of this overall lecture. And they all have titles, each section. So the first one is how to know about God. Second one, how our habits are formed. Third lecture, developing spiritual self-reliance. And fourth lecture, God is your adventure. And you can choose your own adventure. And if you're a child of the 80s, you know what I'm talking about. So again, if you have not ever listened to a lecture episode, this is new for you because we get so many new listeners all the time. If this is new for you, Brynn and I are listening to this lecture with you. We're taking notes. We're all just taking notes. We're listening. And after the lecture, We come back, we talk about it, talk about what we learned together. So stick around to the end. And this one, again, is going to be broken up into sections. And I'll let you know as we're going along what's happening. So I'm not sure when exactly this was recorded, but I guarantee it was before 1960. So, okay.
Probably less close to 1887.
Less close to 1887. Maybe let's just take a guess. 1953. Kind of sounds like that, maybe, right? I guess we'll find out.
Maybe he'll make a reference in there that'll give us a,
clue.
Exact clue.
All right. Well, are you ready, Brynn? Are you ready to learn from this man?
Super ready.
Ernest Holmes. What's up, Holmes? My Holmes. Ernest Holmes. I'm done with that joke, though, just by the way.
Okay.
Maybe. Until the end.
Here, I'll laugh one more time.
Okay, here we go. Let's do this. Ernest Holmes. First one's called How to Know About God. Here we go.
Friends, what do you and I know about God? Let's see if we can find some logical answers which will satisfy both the intellect and the heart. And by the intellect, I mean that thing within us that tries to find a real intelligent reason and answer for things. And by the heart, I mean that something within us equally and perhaps more important than the intellect, that something within us that feels out the hidden meanings of life and tries to interpret them in our daily actions. In reality, our great search is after God, whether we know it or not. And I would like to add something else to this. I have never yet met a man whom I considered mentally and emotionally whole who did not believe in God. But of course, we all have different opinions about God. Some people seem to think that God is an arbitrary judge, wishing good for some and ill for others. But this attitude doesn't seem quite intelligent. For whatever our belief about God may be, common sense does tell us that God does not and could not desire anything but good for anyone. It is logical to believe that God is good, that back of all our evil, there must be and is an eternal goodness. It is intelligent to believe that God is love, and that love can desire only good for everyone. We cannot escape the conclusion, of course, that God is the life of everything. If God is the life, then everyone lives in God. Naturally, God is truth, and no matter what our human errors may be, back of all of them, there is a fundamental truth upon which we may rely. Next, I think we all must agree, or should agree, that God is a divine presence, flowing through everything and in everything. No matter what the appearance at the surface, there is in all people and things a divine presence which exists in a state of eternal harmony and peace and poise. Next, I think we ought to consider that God is power, not only the divine intelligence, but the divine power that holds everything together, the integrating force of life, something to be relied on, depended on with certainty. Well, God is life, God is truth, God is love, power, and certainty. These are conclusions that the intellect makes because they are unavoidable. But what do you and I know about this life and this truth, this power, this presence, and this beauty that God is? And here is where the heart comes in. Here is where our feelings enter, because it isn't enough just to say that God is life. We have to feel what this means. And so the heart says, if God is life, then God must be my life right now. The heart tries to feel back until it reaches a sense of union with life. And in a very real sense, we can say the only way that we can know life is by living it. Are we getting a fullness of life? Do we have a feeling that we are animated by a divine life? And do we sense the movement of this life in our own being? You cannot know God just with your head. You have to feel him with your heart. We all say that God is love. But what do you and I really know about love other than through loving? Love only knows and comprehendeth love. How can a person who is filled with hate know what love is? The only way that you and I can know a God of love is through loving. And it would be impossible for us to know God as love unless we loved each other. For what we do, we know. The way we feel is the way we act. If then we wish to discover a God of love, we must become an embodiment of that love, which we think that God is. It is only through loving that we could possibly understand a God of love. To learn to live rightly and to love rightly is to know God. But God is peace. We cannot believe in a God of confusion. We can only believe in a God of peace. But how can we understand or how can we feel this peace unless we become peaceful? And it is only as we enter into peace that we can become peaceful. If then you will find the person the most filled with peace, you will also find someone who knows more about the God of peace than other people. But God also is truth, and truth never lies. Consequently, the man who knows the most about God as truth is the one who is the most simple, the most sincere, and the most truthful. Well, God is life, God is love, God is peace, and God is truth. But God also is a divine presence filling all space, and the heart alone feels this presence. And the intellect is never satisfied or happy until the heart has felt this presence. The one who the most completely feels this divine presence in everyone is the one who is truly recognizing God in his creation. But before our hearts can feel the presence of God, our whole thinking has to go through a change. This is what Jesus meant when he said that we must be born again. We have to be born from fear into faith, from doubt into certainty, and from confusion into peace. It is easy enough to see, then, that knowing God isn't quite as simple as it sounds. For knowing God is not a profession of the lips so much as it is a feeling in the heart. How often you and I have met people who didn't have terrific intellects. They didn't know what Plato and Socrates had said. They had but very little academic knowledge, and yet we have felt God around them like a living presence, like a dynamic power. We have sensed a deep peace in them, a calm and a poise, a quiet assurance and a sublime faith. And we have laid all our books of learning outside their door, walked humbly in to receive a blessing that comes only from those who are intimately acquainted with the divine presence. The people who have had the greatest influence on me have not been the ones with the greatest intellects. They have been the ones who have developed something that the intellect may or may not know anything about. They have developed a real feeling. They have developed a divine companionship with a power greater than they are, with a presence that is as close to them as their very breath. We all feel that if we could know God, everything would be all right. Our questions would be answered, and our problems would be solved. And so the search goes on. It goes on as it always has and as it always will, until finally everyone comes to believe in God. But before everyone can come to believe in God, there are certain changes that will have to be brought about. For God is the God of all people, not just one race. God is the God of all religions, not just one theology. And until we see this, we are worshiping only a half God. We are worshiping only our own mental images, our personal likes and dislikes. We are not worshiping the God of reality. It's quite a thing to know God, isn't it? And we rebel against the thought that we have to love even our enemies if we are to know that God is love. We rebel against the thought that we have to wish good for others as well as for ourselves. We rebel against the thought that we cannot know God as goodness until we become kind. You and I would like very much to arrive at a place where we are no longer afraid of anything. This means that we shall have to surrender all our little fears into a faith greater than they are. It's hard to let go of our little fears, isn't it? We are so afraid of this and that and something else. We are so fearful of others' opinions about us that we keep ourselves in a continual confusion simply because we haven't gotten quiet long enough really to commune with God. All right, then, let's be honest and simple and sincere and direct. And let each of us be willing to turn to himself and ask this question: what do I know about God? See if perhaps we cannot make the greatest discovery that we have ever made, which is the direct and intimate relationship that every soul must have with the source of its own being, if we wish to arrive at a place of peace of mind and joy in living. What do I know about God? This is the most important, the most far-reaching question I shall ever ask myself. Is my love for others sufficient for me to say that I know that God is love? Because there is nothing in me that dislikes anything. I know that God is love because I look with love on everything. I know that God is peace because I am no longer disturbed. I know that God is certainty because I no longer am afraid. I know that God is my security because I no longer feel insecure. Now I ask myself, what do I know about God as the divine presence? And if I am honest, I shall have to answer that I know God as the divine presence only as I feel this presence in everyone and in everything. Next, I shall ask myself this question: what do I know about God as power? What do I know about God as a law of good operating in my life? And again, I shall have to answer, I know only as much about this power as I am able to prove, and in everything I do. Everything else is a theory. It is a supposition. It might even be a wishful wishing, which too often sinks into a forlorn hope. And a forlorn hope can very easily sink into real despair. It isn't enough to know God as hope, for the heart demands that we know God as certainty, as something to be relied on. So you see, I know God in this way, only in such degree as my use of spiritual power proves to me that such a power exists and that it is always ready to operate in human affairs. Suppose you and I make it a habit of asking ourselves, what do I know about God? And let's not stop with this question, and let's not be satisfied until we find the answer, for no man can be whole while he feels himself detached from the only power that can make him whole. This has been the great mistake that the world has made. It has tried to go it on its own, and in so doing has isolated itself from the source of real power. It has separated itself from the divine presence and then wondered why is it that it has this inward longing, such an irresistible drive to search and search and search. And always the heart has had the answer. We have tried to do it with our heads, our little pee-wee intellects, our 2x4 ideas of life. And now something within us bids us awake and arise and take action and set our face toward a fairer goal, a greater destination. For you and I will be satisfied with nothing but complete certainty. We shouldn't take anything less for an answer. The miracle of it all is in this simple fact. God comes to everyone in the stillness of the heart, in the quietness of the mind, when all fear and doubt and confusion is brushed aside. And in that moment, when the mind turns from everything that is unkind, we shall know that God is love. Friends, among your letters, I find many references to the use of the power we are talking about in the family life. This seems natural and quite the way it ought to be, for the family life is the most important thing on earth. And perhaps I can answer several hundred of these letters in just a few paragraphs. Why not think of your family as the household of God? The mother, the father, the children, whoever lives there, each one is rooted in the divine life. Each is an individual in it. And this one life flows through all, making everyone kind and considerate and lovable, causing everyone to act with consideration for others. There is a sense of happiness and contentment in this family, a sense of peace and joy. There is happiness and enthusiasm and cooperation. There is love and understanding. I think if any parent would take a few moments each day to repeat these statements with deep feeling and with complete conviction, he would soon prove their effectiveness. Of course, our lessons will help you to do this, for they give you many approaches to the subject. Whether it be greater harmony in the family life, the application of the great spiritual law to the well-being of the physical body, or to success in circumstances. These lessons cover all these points. So by all means, won't you send for our lessons and study them? Most important of all, apply the ideas in them to your problems. You will find that as you bring your lives under the government of the divine law and infinite love and perfect wisdom, the changes you desire will begin to take place.
Pretty cool. Wow. Okay. We'll talk about it at the end. I want to get going, but we're going to save it for the end. This next one is called How Our Habits Are Formed. Here we go.
Friends, You and I are interested in learning how to use our minds, and in the most effective manner. We want to know how to think in such a manner that our lives will be happy and successful. And learning how to think rightly is like learning how to use any other set of tools. Most of us have felt that our lives are governed by our conscious thinking, but one of our leading scientists has said that almost 90% of our lives are controlled by our habit patterns of thought. Habit patterns of thought are different from our conscious thinking. For example, when you drive your automobile, you do not consciously think about applying the brake when you see a traffic signal. The act of your foot being placed on the brake is automatic. This action has been repeated so often that the driver no longer has to think about it. A habit has been formed, and this habit pattern takes control of his actions, as though some force or some power other than himself were operating. This matter of habits relates to almost everything we do. And if we are going to get the most out of our mental tools, let's understand how thought patterns are established and what kind of thought patterns are the best for us to live by. Dr. Albert Salter, one of the outstanding psychologists of the world, once had a patient, and he shined a light in front of his eyes. At the same time that the light was turned on, to make the pupils of the eyes contract, a bell was rung. Now this was repeated many times, and each time that the light was placed in front of the patient's eyes, the bell was rung. And each time this happened, the pupils of the eyes contracted. After this had been repeated a sufficient number of times to have trained the person to react in a certain way, another step was taken. The patient was given a switch which controlled both the light and the bell, which he held in his hand. And when the doctor would say the word contract, the patient would close his hand, squeeze the switch, which turned on the light, and ring the bell. When this was done, the pupils of his eyes again contracted. And after this was done often enough to have established a habit, the light and the bell both were taken away, as was the switch. And then an interesting thing was noticed in this experiment. The doctor would first say to the patient, "Contract," and the patient would close his eyes as instructed, and the pupils of the eyes would contract. But to make the experiment even more complete, the patient was then told not to close his hand, while the doctor simply said the word, "Contract." And at this command, the pupils of the eyes would contract. Now, up to this point, there is one thing that we should notice about this experiment. They have all been built and carried out on the basis of suggestion. But here, it seems to me, is a place where the most revealing part of the power of mind enters into the experiment. For finally, the doctor simply sat by his patient and thought the word "contract," and the pupils of the patient's eyes contracted. Now, doesn't this indicate the oneness of mind? A generation past, it would have seemed beyond the realm of imagination that one person could sit and think a certain thing and have another person respond to it so definitely. This could not happen, you see, unless there were but one mind of which each one of us is a part. We have been so accustomed to think that you have a mind, and I have a mind, and our friend has a mind. But the evidence that there is but one mind now shows us that each one of us is using the same mind, only in a different and an individual way. And our use of it is mostly in the formation of our habit patterns. The doctor's patient had established a habit of responding physically to a certain word. The word happened to be contract, and the response was the contraction of the pupil of the eyes. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out how many of us have certain command words or situations or conditions to which we respond in certain ways? We should probably learn that almost every moment of the day we are unconsciously listening to some kind of a command, and we are responding to it exactly in the way that we have been trained to respond. Just think how we react to such words as weariness or fatigue or sorrow. And then let's contrast this and think how differently we respond when we hear words like wonderful and beautiful or happiness and peace. In each case, you see, these are commands that we have learned to react to, and in a certain definite way. It is little wonder that Jesus said, "The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit, and they are life." The story is told of a little stray dog who had been buffeted about in a very cruel way. The little dog slinks around buildings and lives a frightened life. He steals his food wherever he can find it, and at the sound of human voices he runs and hides. Now someone might say about this little dog that he has an inferiority complex or that he is neurotic. The fact of the matter is, he is a very fine little dog. He is doing exactly what he has been trained to do. Unconsciously, he is listening to the many silent commands and reacting to them just as you and I do, as we respond to the habits that we have unconsciously acquired. The reason that anyone reacts to a subconscious command or a habit is because he has accepted the command without reservation. He has taken it into the very depths of his mind. Now that he has done this, the thought pattern takes control and works for him. He doesn't even have to think consciously about it anymore. The wonderful part of this is that we can use this technique of building habits to bring good things into our lives, to bring happiness and health, and to bring peace and success. And if we want to form these new thought patterns, we simply begin to use new command words and persist until they work automatically for us. Naturally, we turn to the words of the man who spoke as no other person ever spoke before or since. We turn to Jesus, the one who used spiritual power in everything he did. We have always wondered about the miracles of Jesus, and somehow or other we have set him apart as being different from others because of his marvelous power. And yet he told us that we could do what he did if we believe that we can. So it would be well that we should inquire into the nature of his habitual thought patterns. Since we have learned that our minds can work in the same way and can establish the same kind of habits, should we not examine the words and the ideas which were the spiritual commands and the impulsions of his life? You will remember how often Jesus used the words love and life. They seem to be two outstanding words in his ministry. He told us to love God and to love each other, and he told us to love ourselves. And he said, "I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." And finally he said, "The very words I speak unto you, they are spirit, and they are life." And so we find that Jesus was always conditioning his mind to respond to words that connected him with the presence of God and with the power of good. He had conditioned his mind to have complete confidence in the divine presence, and to have absolute faith in the authority of his own word. Let's not forget that even in the life of Jesus, this did not happen in a moment's time. He spent many years developing this spiritual habit, which made his life a thing of victory. You will remember that Jesus said that we should pray without ceasing. He who had done more with the power of good than any other man who ever lived was pointing out to us that we also should persist in establishing spiritual habits of thought. And so let's go about it in a direct way. Let's give attention to the kind of words that Jesus used. And let's stop for a moment and examine our own words, our own commands. How many of us are listening to the confusion of the world and all of the words that go to make up this confusion? Even in the face of all this, even in the face of all the confusion on the earth, we can still speak a word of peace, and we can speak a word of peace with complete authority. For we know that behind humanity's conflicts, there is the peace of God, a peace which is never disturbed by our struggle. And when we become disturbed inside, then is the moment to be still and to say, peace. And when we are afraid of anything, then is the time to speak the word faith. And when we become angry or listen to the words of hatred, then is the moment to use the word love. It is not enough simply to do this once or twice a day. Each of us must discipline himself so that he persists in using these creative spiritual commands. We must do it over and over again until what was at first a conscious, a deliberate effort to speak a good word becomes so embodied in our minds, so completely accepted, that there is nothing within us that can argue with the good that we have spoken. We must let the words of faith and love and life become so deeply seated in our minds that we use them automatically. When this happens to us, and when we have acquired this spiritual habit, we shall discover that life responds to the words we use, and it responds in exactly the way we use them, just as Jesus said, "Thy faith hath made thee whole." It is wonderful that you and I are free, that we are free to choose the words of power and words of life. This itself is the gift of God, a gift so freely given but so seldom used. Now we wish to use this power, that we may get more out of life and contribute more to it. And so let's begin this very minute. Let each of us right now say to himself, there is a spiritual command to which I listen and to which I shall respond. From this moment, I shall let the words of love and life and peace speak clearly and with authority in all my experience. No matter what happens around me, no matter what happens in the world, I shall know that this thing called life is forevermore proclaiming its wholeness. It is saying to me, life and love and peace. And I shall listen to this still small voice as it speaks within me, and I shall proclaim its words of peace and life and love, so that they shall become life and power unto me. And because they become life and power to me, they shall bless those around me. They shall bring happiness and confidence and joy and help to those to whom I speak my healing word. And just as the Father hath given unto me of his life, so may I now give unto the world that which is my life, And so may I become a messenger of faith and hope and love. I was glad to receive this letter from Napa, California, in which the writer says that as soon as she has completed the study of her lesson, she at once passes it on to another person. She is even sending the lessons to friends in the East, who, she says, do not have the great privilege that we here in California have. Now I want to ask all of you this question. How are we going to give our friends in the East the same privilege? Let's think about this, and let's pray over it. Let's know that under divine guidance, our invisible church, which is reaching countless thousands right here in California, will reach out to millions across the country. Surely, if you and I and all of us together pray affirmatively and with deep conviction, this which at first might seem like a problem will become merely a great opportunity in which all of us will join in spreading the good news of this message, the great news that there is a power for good greater than we are, and that we really can use it. And I want to thank you 1,000 times for your cheer and your encouragement and for your prayers. And most of all, I want to hear from you. As I have told you so many, many times, your letters are really the mainstay of our program. It is only through knowing that you are receiving help in your everyday lives, that you wish to help others. It is only in knowing that you wish to help us to build our invisible church until it becomes a mighty edifice of faith and a great spiritual force of good. It is only then that we can succeed in this great endeavor.
Okay, and then on to the next one. And this one is called Developing Spiritual Self-Reliance. Here we go.
Friends, one of our great needs is that we shall come to believe in ourselves, in what we are doing, and in our own destiny. No one could have convinced either Jesus or Gandhi that they were unable to accomplish what they set out to do. Self-reliance finds its greatest outlet when it is accompanied by a high vision as well as a quiet determination. Let us see if we cannot analyze just what spiritual self-reliant people do, just how they think, and what is back of their conviction. First of all, the man with spiritual self-reliance must believe in God. History shows that it makes no great difference just what people with spiritual self-reliance may have believed in, that is, so far as their different types of religious faith was concerned. For fundamental to all faith is a real belief in God. Everything else is non-essential. It is the belief in God that gives the background. All people with spiritual self-reliance have had a deep and an abiding conviction that they were one with the Supreme Spirit. This is right where you and I shall have to begin if we wish to develop spiritual self-reliance, something that will make us certain without being over-aggressive, something that will make us completely sure of ourselves, but without egotism, and something that will make us positive in action without becoming intolerant. This something is a complete and an abiding faith in the two principal factors that make for spiritual self-reliance and for creative living. First of all, and fundamental to everything else, is faith in God. And next, but equally necessary, is faith in ourselves. The kind of faith in ourselves we are talking about is, of course, not an isolated faith, as though we were struggling alone, but rather faith in a spiritual self, because this type of self-reliance comes only to those who have a deep conviction, not only about God, but about themselves. Therefore, this kind of self-reliance must have as one of the mainsprings of its being the conviction that man is a living spirit and that he has his being in God. The kind of spiritual self-reliance we are talking about is a reliance on ourselves because we first know that the real self is, as the Bible so beautifully says, hid with Christ in God, which means that everyone is divine in his nature. It means that we are rooted in the infinite. We live because God lives in us. We think because the mind of God thinks through us. And we are able to act creatively because the mind that created everything is creating something new in us right now. All false egotism goes when a true understanding of the real ego dawns on us. If we know that we are one with something bigger than we are, then we shall realize that everything necessary to our lives is already within us. And so we find that the great spiritual geniuses of the ages have spent much time alone with themselves and with God. Now, whether we choose to call this fasting and prayer, or whether we call it meditation, makes no great difference. Here are the first steps, then, in acquiring spiritual self-reliance: to believe in God with our whole being, to believe in the reality of our spiritual selves as forever one with God, and to establish a continual communion with that God who is both within and around us. And last but not least, we find that all these great souls have acted on their vision. Having received it, they have no longer remained passive. They have carried the vision into action in their human affairs. And they were like perennial mountain tops, which flowed down into the valley to irrigate the land. They were like people who listened to some celestial song in the silence of their own souls, and then sing it over again that others may hear. They were like those who went into the secret place of the Most High within themselves, and there received the healing balm of life, and then took it into the marketplace that others could be made whole. Jesus applied his spiritual power for every sort of a definite and a specific purpose: the healing of the sick, feeding the multitude, and all the other miraculous things that took place in his experience. All of these were a direct result of having followed the first three rules fundamental to acquiring spiritual power: belief in God, belief in your spiritual self, communion with God, talking to God, letting God talk to you, and then out of the inspiration that comes, carrying this power and this conviction into the affairs of your everyday living. And let us then see just how this would work out in our experience. And let's start with a suppositional case, a case of someone who lacks confidence in himself. He has no self-reliance at all. He thinks of himself as weak and inadequate, and he is filled with fear and disappointment. He is frustrated because his fondest hopes have been shattered on the rocks of experience. His boat is adrift on an ocean of uncertainty. Seems as though there were no chart, no compass, no guide, no pilot, only aimless and uncertain drifting. Now we have described a pretty forlorn hope, haven't we? Well, at least the prodigal son is as far away from home as he ever can get. And it was right here in this distant land, in this faraway place, it was here that something within him which he hadn't put there at all, something which God had put there, caused him to remember who and what he was. It doesn't matter what his experience may have been, or just where he may now be. He has this divine memory. God did create him, and God is everywhere, and he has never really wandered away from God. The divine is forever speaking. Perhaps he hadn't been listening. And so something within him remembers, seems to whisper to him that things might be different. This is hope. Hope coming like a gleam of light from an invisible source. And he will do well to listen. It is apparent in the story that the prodigal son did listen. He communed with God because everything else had failed. He listened to God because everything else he had been hearing was false and confusing. And now just what happened to him at this point? Up until now, he had been out on his own, alone. He had become frustrated and destitute. Then at long last, he had begun to think, to listen, to talk to that something which he dimly remembered, just as we all do. And that something responded to him and brought with it a vision, the vision of a better life, the vision of a father's home, of loving associates, and a home for which he so greatly longed. Now suppose that everything had stopped right here. He would merely have had a beautiful dream, a dream from which he must so soon awake, only to find himself plunged more deeply into despair. He had followed the first three conclusions that we have described. He had come to believe in God. Perhaps he had never stopped believing in God, but he had come to have a new faith and a new confidence, and something that hadn't happened to him before. He had discovered that he had a spiritual self, that he himself was one with God. And now a new determination came to him, the will to act, backed by the impulse of his faith. A whole new energy flowed into him, a feeling and an imagination. But even this wasn't enough. For the will to act must be followed by the action, so that the will itself passes into action and becomes the act. It is only in this way that we hook up desire and feeling and creativity with our accomplishment. And so the prodigal arose and started on the return journey. But like ourselves, certain doubts and fears assailed him. Would his father receive him? Had he strength enough to make the journey? What enemies would we encounter on the road? For there were thieves on that highway. What deserts must he pass through in the heat of the day? What mountains must he climb? What rivers must be forded? It seems as though every obstruction that the imagination could possibly conceive confronted him. But his vision did not die. His confidence in the newly discovered faith was fresh. It was strong and clear. Even the most deadly attitude of all, which was self-condemnation, finally fled when the Father enfolded him in a loving embrace. And now, don't you see that this really is the story of all of us? It is the story of you and of me and of everyone else. It is the story of human life, the greatest story ever told, but without meaning unless we personalize it. For we are that son. And so our experiment is with ourselves, as it always must be. And what difference does it make if we have floundered and failed? Now that we remember, let us also arise, and let us awaken this sleeping giant that is in us, this spiritual genius who is forevermore one with God. And let's trust this divine partnership as we have never trusted anything else. For everything that says no, let's find a yes. And when the thought comes that says, I cannot, let us say, but God can. That within me, which is pure spirit, can, and it will. The thought comes that says, but look, just look at all these obstructions. Let's say, God knows no obstruction. The spirit within me, which is my real self, knows no obstruction. And for every argument that denies the good you feel belongs to the real self, see to it that you find an affirmation that counteracts it. And you need not be afraid, for faith is forming in you, a faith which can overcome anything, a conviction which no longer doubts, a feeling which reaches out into the invisible and grasps power in its hand, draws it into your experience, and expresses it in your act. Gradually, a conviction will come to you which will turn all obstruction into opportunity, all fear into faith, all doubt into certainty.
Okay, and this next one coming up is called God is Your Adventure. And then, well, you'll find out.
Friends, we are all in search for something that can make life worthwhile, something that can make us whole. And that something that we are searching after is God. Not a God who is far away from us, but a God who is closer to us than our very breath. The discovery of this God in yourself is the greatest discovery you will ever make. You and I are searching for something that can make us whole and happy, something that will include our physical well-being and a real success in living. And if we were to ask ourselves, just what is it that we want from life? I think our answer would be something like this. We want friends. We would like people to like us, and we wish to like others. We want to enter into the joy of living, and above everything else, we want to be happy. We want to eliminate fear from life and have an inward sense of security that makes us feel that all is well with us, not only in this world, but in another world to come. Every man's search really is after God, because everyone is searching for something that will make him whole. And just as self-preservation is the first law of nature, everyone, whether or not he knows it, is in search for the assurance that he will live forever somewhere. but everyone doesn't quite realize that he is searching after God. And this is because we have separated religion from everyday life. We have tried to separate life from living and God from nature. So in some vague sort of way, we have come to feel that the kingdom of God is not really at hand, but rather that it is to transpire in an unknown future. But this was not the attitude that Jesus took, not when he proclaimed that the kingdom of God is at hand, and when he told us that if we would find God in ourselves and in each other and in nature, we should find happiness and wholeness. We should find what the human heart not only longs for, but needs. Particularly in these times of stress and strain, when the question rises from countless thousands, what is it all about? Why this confusion and fear? Is there anything that can make us whole? I believe that out of this great confusion will come a great certainty. Out of this doubt will come a faith. It surely will, if enough people turn to that divine source from which everything springs. God really is our adventure, and divine power alone can save the world from its own folly. So as never before in human history, we do need God. We need to enter into a close communion with the living Spirit and feel the warm embrace of its presence round about us. We need to know that we are not pawns on a checkerboard of chance, that there is a real and a deep meaning to our existence, a meaning that includes this life and everything in it. And after this, a life to which we may look forward with happy anticipation. Nothing less than this could possibly give us happiness or peace. Perhaps at first, it may seem a little bit selfish when we say we want this and we want that and we want something else. Yet is it possible for us to think of anything as entirely separated from ourselves? We cannot think of life without thinking of its connection with us or its relationship to us. We cannot think of others without thinking of their relationship to us. The singer wishes to sing. The dancer wants to dance. The man engaged in business wishes to be a success. The man with a family wants to provide for them, for he wishes to be happy with them. Self-expression is not selfishness. Selfishness is seeking our individual good at the expense of others. Self-expression means that we live with others in happiness, giving to each the privilege of expressing every talent he possesses and rejoicing with him in his success. Though there is nothing wrong with self-expression, this thing called life has entered into each one of us in a unique and an individual way, animating everything we do, and always urging us to do greater things, as though there were no limit to our expansion. But we are so made that the greatest self-expression must include our relationship with others and our relationship to everything in life. This thing called life is God, and God means the invisible presence in the universe. God is the divine power animating everything. God is the law of good controlling everything. Solomon, who was one of the great wise men of all the ages, said, "With all thy getting, get understanding." And Jesus, the most compassionate of all men, said, "I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." He said, I desire that my joy shall enter into you, that the peace which I have shall be your peace, that the certainty that is mine shall be to each of you as an enveloping blanket of security, feeling that all is well with you here and hereafter. For he said, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Jesus also told us that if we find God in all things, we shall find him everywhere, for all these things are added when we see God in them. Jesus made heaven and earth meet, come together. Did he not say that the kingdom of God is at hand? And he told us that everyone who comes into this kingdom, who finds a right relationship with God, will find love and friendship, success and happiness right here and now. Jesus never condemned the desire we have to live happily or to be successful. And so you see, the search for God is not a search for some abstract principle or some future state of being. Our search is to find something right where we are and to discover that something in each other and in nature. The psalmist said that the earth is filled with the glory of God. We all know that the great teaching of Mahatma Gandhi was not that we should renounce this world, but that we should find God in the world. Finding God, or this thing called life, in everything we do, and in every person and everything we contact. This is our real search. And the interesting thing we discover when we read history is that the greatest examples of the human race have always been those who have found this something greater than they are, and yet something that seems to be a part of what they are, something that stands big and tall in people, something that can give us the assurance that all is well. But back of the fear and doubt, there is a great assurance that at the center of the storms of life, there is a place of peace, that at the center of every person, if we look, we can find God. The pathway back to human freedom and human happiness will have to include the idea that God is not separate from his creation. He is part of it. God is our adventure. And the search is both individual and a collective or united one. But as always, we must start with the individual. That means you, and it means me. If our search for God happily results in our finding him, everyone around us will discover this. If our search for happiness makes us happy without robbing others, everyone we contact will be exposed to this happiness. It will be contagious. If our search is for love and we find it, we shall become lovable, and those around us will love us because we have first loved them. If our search for security finally leads us to the place where we are no longer afraid, everyone who contacts us will be helped because of our faith. They will be strengthened because of our strength. They will feel secure in our security. Have you and I really tried to find God in each other? I'm afraid not. Well, there is no use blaming ourselves. It does one no good to beat his breast and cry, "How unworthy I am." This will merely add more confusion to an already confused mind. The searcher after God must learn to forgive himself and to forgive everyone else, to forget even his own weakness as he seeks strength. The searcher after peace must forget his confusion, and he must meditate on peace. And as he does this, he will discover that the confusion leaves him. Searcher after God may be sure of this: he will have to find God in himself before he can hope to find God in others. This is why Jesus said that the blind cannot lead the blind. There has to be a seeing eye. When one of the disciples of John the Baptist asked him one day, "What shall I do to avoid the wrath to come?" John answered something after this manner: "My friend, I have not come to tell you how to avoid some wrath that is to be visited on you in the future. I have come to tell you that the kingdom of God is at hand." This is the attitude we should take, that life holds nothing against us. It desires our good. It wants us to be happy and well and prosperous. Only it wants us to play the game of life the way it ought to be played, in unity and in cooperation with others. These are the only rules that life has laid down for us. It isn't demanded that we do something impossible. It hasn't told us that we have to understand something that perhaps only a few of the greatest intellects can understand. It hasn't told us that we have to become saints before we can enter into the kingdom of God. It has merely said this: "Here I am. Accept me. I am truth, I am wisdom, I am love, I am peace, and I am eternal goodness." A child can understand this. And this is why Jesus exclaimed, "Suffer the little ones to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God." Suppose, then, that you and I start all over, beginning right now, and let's see if we can't learn to forget all the heartache and sorrow and pain, all the fear, the frustration and uncertainty, and go back inside ourselves until we find that little child who isn't afraid, because by some divine instinct within him, he knows that underneath are the everlasting arms. Are we afraid? Are we afraid of becoming that spontaneous child again, lest someone think that we are foolish? Well, who is there among us who wouldn't be happy as a child again? Who is there among us who would not recapture the dream of his youth? Or we are tired of building and spoiling and building again, and we long for the dear old river where we idled our youth away. For a dreamer lives forever, but a toiler dies in a day. No, if the greatest man who ever lived has told us that we must become as little children, we need not be afraid of being childlike. Remember this: childlike does not mean being childish or silly or foolish. Childlike implies a sublime attitude a scientist must have as he stands in awe before the majesty and the might of nature. It is that childlike quality that the mathematician must have as he contemplates the infinity of numbers. It is that reaching out toward the essence of beauty which every artist feels when he captures the glory of a sunset or the soft, radiant pathway of the moon across the water. We need not be afraid of being childlike. Rather, we should fear not to be childlike, for only through an attitude of faith and trust can we ever hope to recapture our lost paradise. Yes, your search and mine is for God. God, the great reality, God, that divine good, which alone can give us security, that infinite and all-enveloping love that alone can give us confidence in life. And so let's try to find God in ourselves and in each other. And let's not be afraid to look for him in human events. Just as surely as we do this, we shall find him. Ask, and ye shall receive. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it will be opened unto you.
Wow, this has all been really interesting. So here's a bonus one because those recordings were, fairly short. Let's do one more. And it's called How to Draw from Your Spiritual Bank Account. Okay, let's learn about this. Bonus, Ernest Holmes, and then we'll be back.
Friends, we all know that we must have money before we can spend it. How comfortable it makes us feel to have a good checking account. It gives us a sense of security and well-being. But there is another kind of checking account that is equally important, and this is your spiritual bank account. For there are great spiritual forces that we can draw on and deposit in our minds, forces that can be used in any emergency, in any stress or strain of life. This thing called life has enough of everything and to spare. It contains love and faith and peace of mind and joy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could build up a spiritual bank account of all these things and hold them in reserve, an account sufficient to meet every emergency in our lives? For we are always being called on to meet some emergency. There are times when we need more love and tolerance, more kindness and understanding, a deeper faith and a higher hope. How would it be if we should open up a spiritual account with the bank of life itself, and realizing that we are drawing on the infinite, see to it that each day we are depositing enough hope and happiness and faith to meet any emergency that can arise? But how would we go about to open up such an account and be certain that we have enough of these qualities on deposit so that our checks will be honored whenever any emergency arises? Well, in our ordinary affairs, we know that we must deposit money if we want to draw checks. First, we have to earn the money. And this also will be true of our spiritual bank account. But the earning of the supply for our spiritual bank account is just a little different. For we earn the ability to draw on the bank of love only first through practicing love, only from drawing love into our minds from the vast storehouse of love, which God is. Why then couldn't we think of it this way? God already has made the initial deposit, and a big one, for everyone who is born in this world, because God has given himself to us. He has imparted his own life, and in a way beyond our comprehension, he has endowed us with the capacity to love. In actual practice, we shall earn the ability to draw on this bank through meditation and prayer, and through communion with the infinite, using statements in our meditations, perhaps similar to the following: God is love. All the love there is mine now. I shall endeavor to see something lovable in everyone I meet, in every situation I find myself in. And as I do this, I shall accumulate a great storehouse to be deposited in my own bank. Then when some experience comes along which seems unkind or unlovable, I shall be able to write a check on my bank of love, a check that will cover every liability of hate or of unkindness. If you have accumulated a certain amount of love, then meet some situation where discord and strife enter, just get quiet within yourself and say, I am bringing love to bear on this situation, a love that comprehends and includes everything, a love that has no hurt in it, a love that isn't afraid, a love that is calm and confident and sure of itself. And right here is where the law of mind in action comes into play. For when you apply your thought of love directly to a discordant situation, your thought of love can heal that situation. If you have already deposited enough love in your checking account, you will find that your checks will be honored by the bank of life, and the situation that confronts you will be healed. And this whole process is quite simple. So let's analyze the 2 or 3 important things about it. First of all, you have to have a firm conviction that God is love, and you must have an equally firm conviction that when you apply this principle of love to any human problem, the words you speak in your meditation or your treatment or prayer, these words will actually operate as a law to the condition that confronts you and will overcome everything that opposes it. Now, this is not an act of the will, and it has nothing to do with holding thoughts. It has nothing to do with concentrating your mind or influencing people. It has to do only with this one simple thought: God is love. God already has deposited love at the center of every man's being, whether or not he knows it. And this love which you now use is not only the greatest sentiment in the world, it is a supreme power. It is a perfect law. It is an actual reality. And because you have deposited a love which can see around everything, and because you have ample love left over in your own thought, you will find that the love you use, acting as law, will overcome the fear, the hate, and the sense of insecurity that comes whenever there is a lack of love. Perfect love alone can cast out fear, for love always is greater than fear. All that fear can do is to cast a shadow across your pathway. But this shadow is dissipated when you look at it with love. You see, you are not dealing with 2 opposing forces, but only with one force, which is absolute and positive and conclusive. And now let's think of some of the other things I am certain we want to deposit in the bank of life. One of the most important ones next to love is faith. Faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in what you are doing, and faith in those around you. Let's see then if we cannot draw on the great reservoir of all faith through a complete surrender of our fears, whether they be big or little. Faith is natural. Fear is unnatural. Faith is positive, while fear is negative. Faith is an affirmation. Fear is a denial of life. And we need a great deal of faith if we are going to meet all the fears and uncertainties that everyone encounters. Jesus had deposited so much faith in his bank of life that he was able to meet every challenge of fear with a complete certainty. Just a little faith couldn't do this. Just as you couldn't pay $1,000 debt with $500. So it is impossible to meet a trying circumstance unless you have a sufficient faith. When Jesus stood before the tomb of Lazarus, he was confronted with the fear of death. He was confronted with the weeping and the wailing of the family. They told him that he dare not roll the stone away from the tomb. Perhaps this stone is a symbol of the obstruction that often confronts us, and how often we look at the stone, how often we think of the tomb with the dead inside. How seldom do we realize that God made that stone, and that what God has put there, he can remove. How seldom we realize that there are no obstructions to divine power. And perhaps, after all, the stone was only in our own minds, and the tomb, and the dead man. But Jesus lifted up his voice in communion with God. He raised his thought above the fear of the moment. I don't think Jesus could have done this unless he had first spent much time drawing on the bank of life and depositing large amounts of faith to his account. For on another occasion, Jesus had said, "This kind comes out but by fasting and prayer." Yes, Jesus had spent much time alone with God until that which to us seems so unreal, so theoretical, was to him the one solid reality. God is life. God is power. And this life and this power are available right now. I am sure Jesus must gradually have accumulated this storehouse of faith. When the emergency arose, he was able to stand calm and certain, uncaught by the fears and the weeping and the wailing of others. He looked up and not down. Then he offered one of the greatest short prayers of the ages. He said, "Father, I thank thee that thou hearest me, and I know that thou hearest me always." What sublime confidence, what infinite trust, what limitless assurance. Father, I thank thee. How many of us have enough faith deposited in the bank of life so that when fear confronts us, we can boldly proclaim, "My faith is sufficient. My trust is complete. My assurance is absolute. Father, I thank thee that thou hearest me." There is no doubt here, no uncertainty, no hesitation. And I know. What power, what possibility is caught in these two simple words? I know. There is no question, no doubt. I know that thou hearest me always. Not once in a while, not by and by, not yesterday, but here, today, as I face this tomb, in the midst of doubt and fear and uncertainty, I know. Then Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Jesus could not have said, "Lazarus, come forth," not with this assurance, if he had been depending on his human willpower. No, he was merely standing still and watching the glory of life with a calm assurance that his words were honored by a power greater than he, that power that every one of us has access to. And there are many other things that we should accumulate and deposit in the bank of life, other things beside love and faith. And important among them, I think, is joy and happiness. For life has intended us to be glad. There is always a song somewhere, if we know how to sing it. There is always a joy if we will find it. And we need to deposit a lot of peace in our minds, a peace that rides above the confusion that confronts us. If you will listen to peace, you will hear it, and it will flood your whole being. Then when you meet confusion, just write out your check on the bank of peace. Don't be afraid to sign it in the name of God, for this is God's bank. And just as surely as you do this, you will discover that your words of peace, acting as a law of good, will draw on a power greater than you are and liquidate the confusion. And now, what does all this mean? What does it mean other than practicing the presence of God, coming to know that you are in partnership with the original banker? Yes, this really is practicing the presence of God in everything we do, and adding this one more thing, which is the great new light now coming into the world, the knowledge and the certainty that there is a law of mind, a law of good, which acts in, upon, and through our thinking. It was this secret of the ages that Jesus knew. And it is this secret that you and I must discover and use, each for himself. For there is a power that honors your faith. There is a love that meets love with love, a law that meets good with good. And this law, this power, this divine presence, you and I did not create. We had no more to do with it than we did with the creation of the north wind or the evening star. It was there before ever we recognized it. It would be there if you and I had no existence whatsoever, but it doesn't seem to be there to you and to me until we believe in it and use it. Let us then be certain that we open up our account with this great bank of life. For here, and here alone, is the real substance that we can draw on to purchase every good and beautiful thing that life has in store for us. Here alone is peace and joy and certainty. Here alone is freedom from fear and doubt. Let us then close all our accounts with the lesser banks and throw away the old checkbooks and learn to turn daily to the one and the only supreme source, which is God.
Okay, and we're back after the final bonus little snippet there, your spiritual bank accounts. Dr. Ernest Holmes. Interesting character. Definitely like Christian leaning. He brought up Jesus so much and related so many things to the Jesus story. But then, of course, he talked about how God is the God of all religions. So he had that universal spiritualist outlook, but he just kind of put it through that filter. Really good information and really good techniques to kind of understand what that higher thing is and develop a relationship with it. And breaking down, of course, just the mechanisms of spirituality, how a spiritual relationship and a spiritual understanding can activate a divine life within you, like activate the divine life, and then it becomes your divine life as you integrate pure faith. Faith is something that I talk about quite a bit on this show. I often say fear is the absence of faith. And in each of these recordings, he brought up the power of faith in different ways. and how the example of faith and the strengthening of faith can strengthen what you can manifest and how you can build your own personal power. Brynn, Dr. Ernest Holmes, what did you think about his vibe? He was a pretty cool guy. Loving, right? All he talked about was love. God is love. Everything is love. You gotta be loving. He definitely was putting out the best information. What do you think about love? Do you love Dr. Ernest Holmes?
Yeah, no, it was all great information. He had a very peaceful, calm, assured vibe. He was
Friends,
yes. Everyone's a friend. Everyone is love. No, I really enjoyed his simple, straightforward approach to talking about love and light and faith, and that is what everything is based upon. And when you start with those foundations and then you move out into the world with your own passions and ideas and motivations and things, if you have that as your core, then the universe wants you to be happy and wants you to fulfill your desires and all those things when they have the basis of love and light and faith. Then it's for the good of all. And so it all makes sense and it all flows. One thing he said, I just noticed the way he pronounced the word persist, or that's how I pronounce it, is persist, and he pronounced it persist. But he was talking about, no, what was interesting about that is because it made me think of exist, and he was talking about, he was saying to persist in faith and persist in love and light and like holding those frequencies. But then when he was pronouncing it persist, it just made me think of that he was combining those words for me to exist in the persistence of faith and love.
Yes, you can tell he was deeply motivated. He was deeply focused on living a spiritual life and understanding these things and helping other people understand them in that era. Again, he was born 1887. He talked about the power of service in different ways. Acting, you get all this information, and then the next step is actually doing something with it out in the world. Pretty common understanding among the best spiritual people, but here he is again saying that as an affirmation. He talked about the power of affirmation and the greatest wealth being, of course, your relationship with the divine, the God within. Again, he put it through a Christian filter. That seemed to be his vibe, but he was very open in the way he communicated that information.
I also think in the time that he was speaking, you have to meet people where they're at. And I think that's pretty much where his audience would have been coming from, would have been through a Christian filter. And some of the things he said, while they are universal laws and sort of basic spiritual tenets, they still may have been revolutionary, extracting them from Christianity. Like, he's talking about faith, he's talking about Jesus, all those things, but he's really talking about universal truths and a universal spirituality. But he's still got to meet people at that place of talking about Jesus and sort of taking it from that lens.
Yes, in America, America, the 20s to the 50s, that was probably from the 1950s. You're trying to meet people where they're at, but I really truly believe that's where he was at spiritually, most likely. But still, of course, having that overarching understanding that everyone has an understanding that is equally as valid as yours in their own way.
Right. And that's what I mean. I mean, I think that is where he was at. He was a minister, but he saw beyond the confines of just one religion or, whatever the label was of the people that were listening to him.
Right, exactly. And I really liked how he talked about how we were one mind. Like, we know this, like everything exists within the mind of God, the mind of the divine. But hearing it again in a different way, slightly different, we're just this one mind, and we're aspects. We're minds within a mind. We're aspects of one mind. And that, again, highlights our unity and it's within our unity and that understanding of that unity that will be a catalyst for our evolution and our ascension as humans. And Brynn, what else do you have? You have some notes. She's always such a note taker. I take notes. She's taking notes. Go ahead, Brynn.
I always like to take notes. Not necessarily everything I'm going to say, but just little reminders along the way and things to think about also later. Well, just when he was talking about the steps of creating that foundation of faith in God and then faith in yourself as the spiritual self and being rooted in the infinite and pulling from that infinite mind that you think because God is thinking through you, and you create because God is creating through you, and you provide your service because that's coming through you as the infinite creativity and the infinite light, and that we all tap into that same reservoir. Kind of like the bank account. How's your bank account,
the
Jake?
spiritual bank account. I've been putting a lot of faith in there. I'm always out there talking about faith with my friends, family. You guys, the Midnight on Earth family, we're always talking about the power of faith. Fear is the absence of faith. Faith just being that certainty. And within that certainty, that stable frequency, you can attract anything into your life that you harmonize with. That's for your good. Everything is good, and like Louise Hay has said, is working out for your highest good. He's saying it in his way as well. And Brynn, do you have anything else before we're closing this episode out, this incredible lecture episode where we met this incredible human?
A dreamer lives forever. A toiler dies in a day.
Ah, you gotta keep on dreaming, people.
I know. I was like, oh, I'll write that down. Yeah.
Okay.
Good one to remember.
Yeah. And a lot of these points that he has made throughout this episode are good things to remember. I really like this guy. He's got an incredible vibe. Graduated in 1960, but still here with us through the miracle of recording. Brynn, thank you so much for being here. She's here with us through the miracle of
faith.
Through the miracle of the fact that you get to be here. To me, that's a miracle. And thank you so much for being here. VitalForceHerbs.com, VITAL. Vital Force Herbs.
Thanks so much for the enlightening conversation, as always.
Yeah, that was really cool. And thanks for being a sponsor. And thanks for creating the highest quality tincture blends out there in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So there you go, people. Ernest Holmes. At this juncture, I guess I have to say peace out, Holmes, as we go into next week's episode. Thank you so much for being here, people. Thank you so much for sticking it out to the end and learning with us, as you often do during these lecture episodes. We will see you next week. Midnight on Earth.